All right, so today we got to talk about this story from Patrick Moore, and it's from the Business Insider, and it's titled 49 Former NASA Scientists Send a Letter Disputing Climate Change. And Patrick Moore says 7 Apollo astronauts and 2 former directors of NASA Space Center among 49 former NASA employees who insist NASA and NASA GISS stop using computer models and limit stance to what can be proven empirically, Hansen and Schmidt singled out. Now, again, this is something that a lot of people don't know, is that everybody seems to just blindly believe the whole 97% of scientists agree. Well, number one, that's a fake stat, right? And that if you actually dig a little deeper into that stat, you quickly find that they sent out it was a poll or an email or a survey, I don't remember exactly what it was, to about, I think it was like 2 or 3 thousand scientists and geologists and, quote unquote experts. And you had to answer yes to a handful of questions for your feedback to actually have been taken into account. And I think that of those, thousands of, people they sent it out to, they actually took the opinion of like 100 of those, like right, like they actually. And the other problem too is that you had to answer yes to a handful of questions that basically, um, if you answered yes, you're basically assuming that climate change is man-made, right? So it was basically leading people on. So I mean, in a nutshell, that whole 97% number is very misleading. Like, it's very misleading, and very selective in the fact that of all the people they asked, like, imagine if someone did a survey. Yeah, we sent out a survey to, like, 5,000 doctors, and we took the opinion of 100 of them, and therefore, what we're saying is very credible. Well, what about the 95% that didn't respond? What about their opinions? You'd think those would be relevant, right? What the exact number is, I really don't know. Like, I really don't know what actual percentage of quote unquote experts agree. The one thing I do know is that it's a lot higher than what the climate alarmists would have you think, and a lot higher being the ones that disagree. And the other problem being too is that a lot of these people, their job and their pay depends upon climate change being this man-made massive issue, right? Because let's just say that overwhelming evidence that's absolutely 100% indisputable comes out tomorrow saying climate change is not man-made. It's 100%, natural cycles. And okay, well, what would happen is that many of these climate scientists would lose their jobs, right? Like, they would lose the grant money, because why in the world would you study it if you know that humans aren't having an effect, right? We don't spend the amount of money that the government spend on climate change to study, flat Earth or the Earth as the center of the solar system, because we know they're both BS, right? So yeah, that is the problem, and that is one of the many reasons why it's pretty hard to take some of these climate scientists' opinions seriously when their pay and their livelihood is dependent upon them having an opinion towards one side of the worldview, right? Now, in other words, they're not objective, right? In other words, like I say, they're not objective, and that is the problem. Now, does that say that they're all of their opinions can be dismissed? No, but the easiest way to tell if someone's opinion can have a bias is, okay, is them having an opinion one way or the other, is there a financial incentive towards doing it? And when it comes to these climate scientists, well, many of them, the answer to that is yes. Like, right? Like, the answer to many of them is yes. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out. And again, the other thing being is that it's a complete lie that the vast majority of scientists agree. That's just not true, right? And it's just not true. And like I say, I think the main reason why a lot of this happens is that governments pretty much pay these people to put out an opinion that is, in a nutshell, humans are causing climate change. Like, that's pretty much what they're paid to do. And that's the problem. Like, that's the problem. And here, I mean, the other thing too is that many of these opinions and these studies and whatnot, they're highly questionable. Like, they're highly questionable in that, you know, why has there been many periods throughout history to where The Earth has been much warmer than it is right now. Why is there many periods where it's much colder? And not to mention, too, the idea of CO2 being the big driver, which is a complete lie. Um, there has been many periods, there has been many very warm periods where CO2 has not been high, and there's been many cold periods where CO2 has been, right? So the idea that CO2 drives climate is highly questionable at the very least, and outright bunk at the worst. And the fact that many of these climate scientists are going under the assumption when they do their research that that's a thing, again, that's another thing that makes it just highly questionable, if you ask me. So, I mean, there's many things to point out here, but again, I just wanted to point this out because many people don't know. Even people amongst the skeptic community, they don't know that this many scientists disagree. Like, there's tons of, I mean, there's literally thousands of scientists that have signed their name off questioning the whole narrative, right? So again, that's the thing I wanted to point out here. I mean, not to mention too, this is a big issue up in the news again, right? For two main reasons, I guess. When it comes to Canada, we have a government that wants to push a green, recovery coming out of this whole thing, which is absolutely insane. It's only going to hurt the economy even more, which is just going to give them an excuse to push for more socialist policies. Again, that is the plan. Like, when it comes to climate change, the main goal is not climate change. Like I say, if it was, they wouldn't spend all their time worried about Alberta and Canada or even the States to a lesser degree. Because again, the majority of the world's emissions come from China and India. They're building coal power plants all the time. So again, if they actually cared about this kind of stuff, they would spend all their time trying to convince China and India from going away from fossil fuels. And the fact that they don't just goes to show that the goal is to push socialism, right? Like, the goal is to push socialism. And that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. I mean, and the other big thing lately too is these forest fires in the States. Well, you have all these, you have Governor Newsom in California, one of the biggest idiots out there, um, talking about, oh, climate change is real and this is proof. And well, no, there's been tons of people charged with arson when it comes to this kind of stuff. Like, tons of them. I see stories almost every day of, I mean, some of them are probably repeats, but of people that have been charged with arson in California and Oregon, that are starting these fires. Like, and not to mention too, there's I've seen multiple examples of, you look at people that have discovered, burnt out Molotov cocktails, um, or ones that were faulty also in like these random rural areas in the States. So again, like, there's tons of this is arson. Now, here's the other thing too, is that you look at long ago, like long before, um, you know, fossil fuels even existed, or at the very least we used them for day-to-day life. You look at reports in like the 1800s and whatnot, there was tons of forest fires you can read about back in the day. I mean, Tony Heller does a good job pointing to these cases. He goes through old newspapers and points out that, yeah, forest fires were incredibly common back then as well. So, yeah, I mean, those are just some things I wanted to point out. But again, the big thing being is in Canada here, we're going to have this green recovery, whatever it is they're calling it. It's just absolute insanity. They're going to increase the carbon tax. It's only going to hurt things even more, which will give them an excuse to push more socialist policy. I mean, with these people, it's always, how can we get more? I mean, it's not the best way of describing it, but how can we get more socialism? Like, and I mean, a better way of putting it is, how can we get more government control over the economy and over people's lives? That is the goal. That is the goal. How can we get more government control? And everything that leads to more government needs to be pushed back against is pretty much the take-home point. So, anyway, I just wanted to bring this up because it's pretty important for people to know about and recognize. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on Twitter especially, and also BitChute and Parler. Those links are in the description, so just click on them, give me a follow. I'd really appreciate it.